Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today, finally, with a end of project video for this 1/6 scale Armortek radio-controlled early production German Tiger 1. Since the last video update, the last of the model's fittings and details have been mounted, and the model in this video is now 100% complete. Oh, does that feel good to say? Anyway, in this video, we're going to go over the details as well as the last of the fittings that went into this build, bring it up to the state that you see it here. Now, if anyone is wondering, there's not going to be a whole lot of driving of this model in this video, and the reason for that is quite simply put, I'm going to have a whole video comprised of nothing but the final test drive of this model, which should be uploaded shortly after this video drops. So you want to stay tuned for that video because that's where I really take this model out for its final paces. Now, for anyone who's stumbling into this video for the first time and are unaware of the other project update videos for this build, or even unaware of the photographs of this build that have been posted online, the model started off as a 1/6 scale all-metal radio control kit from Armortek. Armortek is a British-based 1/6 scale model company that focuses primarily in radio-controlled military vehicles, but what's unique about them is that they are all comprised of metal, and the metal is scale thickness. It's all aluminum plate construction and gets affixed in a number of different ways, which of course I go over in more depth in the previous project update videos that came out prior to this video here. I strongly recommend stopping this video to check out the backlog library to see exactly what the kit is and what brought it to the specs you see it here. Now, while on that note, the model that we see here is built for private commission and belongs to a private collector. And like I frequently mention in these videos, I often take on commission build projects from models ranging between 1/35 scale and 1/6 scale. For availability and pricing information, this information will be best by contacting me through the email address listed below, which is info@eastcoastarmory.com. Before we go any further with the video though, let's go ahead and take a quick walk around this model. And here are the other fittings now that were mentioned in the last video update, but here are now fully painted and weathered and are ready for installation. Starting with the main front shovel, you can see that the unit has been weathered. And like I said before in the other video, originally this piece came with a cast metal handle, which the builder would need to paint and weather to replicate wood. And like I said in that video, rather than utilizing that piece of kit, I went ahead and just simply swapped it out and replaced it with a unit made from real wood. The wood was bent to have that little curve in it, which is found on this shovel here. And now that it's painted and weathered, the unit looks much better in my opinion than if trying to mimic the wood tone with the use of paints and other sorts of techniques. Moving up takes us to the fire extinguisher. This unit was the Armorpacks.com resin unit that was supplied with the Armortek kit, and since the last video you can see it has been painted and weathered, and here it is now ready for installation. Here we have the wire clipper. This, I believe, was a 6-scale Icons piece if I'm not mistaken, but it might be the Armorpacks one. I'm a little hazy on that. That information is discussed more in depth in the video update where I go into more depth about these other fittings. But anyway, here you can see it again, painted, weathered, and ready for installation. Now, one addendum I want to add is on the handles themselves. In the past, I would say that the handles would have been wood on these pieces. However, I was mistaken. On the real German AFE clippers, they were actually made from metal, but they were covered in a veneer of sort, which gave them some sort of insulation for the user's hands. On the unit here, I went ahead and replicated that by painting the unit as opposed to replacing it with wooden handles. Of course, one of the largest and most iconic bits of equipment that need to be mounted to the tank are the main tow cables. The tow cables you see here are the kit original ones and were left 100% stock. The only thing I did was painted them and gave them a little bit of weathering. Other than that, these cables come pre-assembled, and here are the eyelets up close. Notice they have their inner loop protective sections, just like on the real units, and it's a nice touch that Armortek included them with their cables. Like I said before, these cables came pre-assembled with all of these features that we have here. Of course, the only thing needed to be added was the paint and the weathering. At this point here, the cables are now ready for installation to the top deck. Another one of the final fittings is the barrel for the Bow MG34T machine gun. Now, the unit that we have here is a resin casting from Panzerwerk.com. The kit did originally supply you with the detail for this part here, however, it was very basic in its overall detailing. The Armortek one in comparison has a similar size and shape, but is missing all of this fine detailing found on this section here of the unit. These Panzerwerk resin units are highly recommended. Unfortunately, Panzerwerk doesn't seem to be making any parts at the moment, and I believe Armorpacks may have purchased the rights to produce this piece in white metal. However, I'm a little bit hazy on this information. I will say, though, that these resin units have been used on many of my builds and are always a highlight of them, and they are, again, highly recommended. Now, when it comes time for painting and weathering, the barrel was painted, and the weathering was added. Now, in terms of powder fouling, this is where this unit is actually very interesting. On the muzzle end here, I went ahead and added the usual powder fouling. However, if you notice, I also added some powder fouling on these little vent holes that we have on the sides. And this actually has to do with the way the MG34 works. The MG34 is a recoil-operated belt-fed machine gun, and on the end here we have what's called the booster cap. There's a little gap between the end of the muzzle and the cone here of the flash suppressor. In this little section over here, when the round goes off, the expelling gases build up in this section, and this gives a little bit more oomph to recoil the barrel backward, which will then cycle the action of the machine gun. Because of that, we do have some of these little vent holes here, and once the barrel is all the way at its furthest point, the excessive or the leftover gas left in the system here bleeds and vents out of this section. Thus, because of that, you will see some powder fouling found on these sections over here. This is one of those fine details that unless you shot or know the operation of the MG34, you're going to miss on your builds. Another one of the tools that are getting fitted at the tank at this time is the tank's jack. Now, the jack, I went in more detail and depth about where it comes from and what it is in the last video update. And here we can see the piece now all assembled and fully painted, weathered, and of course ready for installation. See all the weathering that was added to the piece, which is kind of funny because generally whenever you see a jack or some kind of a tool in this type of condition on YouTube, it's usually on one of those tool restoration videos, which I gotta admit are pretty entertaining to watch at times. Now, when it comes to the type of coloring that are used on these German jacks, you have several options available as the builder. I've seen them either in a black parkerized finish, like this one would have been originally, or I've also seen them painted with the vehicle's base coat, be it Dunkelgelb or Panzer Gray. All three of which are acceptable and can be used on your build, and this is really up to the discretion of the builder at hand. Another bit of detailing that's going to be added to the model are these U-shackle hooks that we have here. These units are not supplied with the Armortek kit and must be tracked down via an aftermarket source. Now, the units on this table, I believe, are either from armor packs or from 6-scale icons, and from what I can remember, I think I'm leaning on the latter. The pieces are made from white metal and have their lock bolt, which is to scale and actually threads into the unit here, just like it does on the real unit. Now, from what I can remember, the aftermarket source who made these had two variations offered. We have here the flat type, and then there's also the round bar type as well. Both units were high quality and are recommended depending, again, which source are they from. If they're from armor packs, they can be found on his website, or if they were from 6-scale icons, this set was purchased by Field of Armor Tanks, and that vendor is selling the entire catalog of the original 6-scale icons lineup. Along with the main cables, the tank's track removal cable has also been pre-prepped and is now ready for installation. Now, like with the other cables, these are pre-assembled by Armortek and have the same type of eyelet type detailing that I mentioned before. Here you can see how the cable was also painted and weathered in much the same format as the main cables were. The only difference, however, compared to the other cables is that for the track removal cables, they have these extra bit of hardware that we have here on either end. These are so that the cable connect to the, I guess you would call them spindles, or what's the nautical term? It's escaped me at the moment, that are found on the side of the hull in which these would clamp onto. Now, these had to have been scratch built as these are not part of the original Armortek kit and were fabricated by myself. Well, trucking along to the finish line first takes us to the antenna base. The antenna base that we have here is made from the same molds that are used on many of my other 1/6 scale German World War II models. The only difference is that unlike the other builds where I would first either use standard resin and then paint it to mimic that of the German rubber antenna base, or recently where I was utilizing a flexible dyed black resin to get the same look. For this model here, I went ahead and switched the medium altogether and went with actual rubber. With the rubber material, it's nice and flexible, just like the real one, and because of the medium, it doesn't have to be painted anywhere past this point here. From here, the unit can just be dropped directly onto the hull of the model. Now, this part here is not a catalog item. It's not something that I actively post on the EastCoastArmory.com product line. However, if there is enough interest for it, I'll probably consider on doing a run of these units that we have here. Now, if you notice, there's a brass tube which runs along the inside portion of the antenna base. This, of course, gives it some strength, but it also, this is the mounting point for the actual German antenna. Unlike American tanks where they have a screw-on type system, the Germans went ahead with a different type of format where we had a brass tube and the antenna would slip into place, and then via this wing nut that we have here, you would clamp it down and this would keep the antenna fixed where it needs to be. Now, as you can see, all of the detailing has been added, and this guy here is ready for installation. Now, I went ahead and also created the antenna itself. That's currently drying in paint and will be mounted to the antenna base after this guy is fitted to the model. I'll be going over more on that a little bit later in this video. From the antenna now takes us to the jack block. Now, the jack block that we have here is not the kit original one. The kit does supply you with a decent wooden block that's to the correct shape and proportions. The reason why that unit wasn't used for this build was quite simply put, I kind of misplaced it in my shop. So a new block of wood was crafted in the same shape and dimensions. However, having said that, the kit one is perfectly viable, and if had, would have receive the exact same detailing that you see here. Now, in order to detail up the jack block on these German tanks, I will go ahead and add the metal strips that we have here along the ends. These rivets here are real fasteners and are used to actually hold the strips to the wood. I also went ahead and mounted on the little handle that we have here. This is a resin piece, and it is actually sold on the EastCoastArmory.com catalog with the other provisions for mounting the jack block to the top of the Tiger 1. Other than that, the piece got painted and weathered in my usual format, and from here it can get mounted directly to the vehicle. Probably one of the last bits of equipment that are going to be fitted to the tank at this time is the spare track section. Now, what was mentioned in an earlier video is that this model of the Tiger 1 does have its spare track rack, which is mounted on the front armor plate of the vehicle. Now, rather than utilizing some of the spare metal track links that I have left over from assembling the main tank caterpillars for the detail roll, in their place I went ahead and utilized cast resin track links for this application. If anyone's wondering why I did that, well, really twofold. First, I like to save the metal track links for use of spares in case the odd chance a link were to break or become damaged. You have now a plethora of metal links in order to get the tank up and running again. And second is that because this is really just for detail purposes only, using the resin links in place of the metal ones does save a significant amount of weight. Now, this may seem a little strange to some people because the tank already is a heavy model, and what use is it saving, a couple ounces here or there? Well, keep in mind, it's now less weight that the model's motors need to lug around when the model is in operation. Now, like I said before, the links are all made from cast resin, and they are fully functional. Now, the links have been painted and weathered with my usual format, and these are now going to simply get mounted to the front of the Tiger 1. Now, towards the end of the last video update, I went ahead and mentioned that I was developing a new accessory for these 1/6 scale German radio control tanks, and it was something that was really cool and something that I haven't done on any of my other RC tank builds in the past. Well, without further ado, drum roll please. And here it is. Now, what exactly is this, you ask? Quite simple. This is the World War II German AFV extended range fuel trailer. Well, this is just half of it because once I drop the fuel drum on, you can see exactly how the unit completes out. Now, for the viewers out there who are subscribed and follow the EastCoastArmory.com Facebook page, which I want to first thank you if you do so, this shouldn't be too much of a surprise because I did go ahead and preview this set a number of months ago. However, the unit is now in hand and fully assembled. Now, currently, at the time of filming of this video, this unit here is not yet listed on the EastCoastArmory.com product line. The model that we have here is the pre-production sample, and after my experiences with building and assembling this unit that we have here, I saw some areas which could be improved, further enhancing the model compared to the version that you see here on the table. However, with this model now in hand, I could walk you through the basic underpinnings of this kit and what features that it does have. So let's go ahead and bring the camera in closer so I can get to show you some of the features that are found on this model. First and foremost, the EastCoastArmory.com German fuel trailer kit is just like the other full ECA kits that are listed on the catalog, in which they are comprised of primarily 3D printed components. This is true for just about all of the parts that we have here, with the exception of the rubber tires, which I'll go over in a second. With the oil drum removed, you get to see in better detail the chassis and frame that are found on this kit. Here goes the underside. Now, just like with the other trailer kits that are found on ECA, this model here uses as much single-piece printing as possible for both efficiency with detailing, as well as simplicity for the end user. The frame, the main tow arm, as well as the leaf spring suspension and the axle are all one integral printing. This is also true for the supports for the oil drum as well. Note the fastener and rivet detailing found on this section here, as well as also the welding detailing that we have here on the edges. If I flip it over, you can see the detailing found on the opposite side as well. Now, these straps that we have here are for the oil drum, and these are not integrally printed to the body, and these just simply get mounted to the appropriate locations that are found on the frames. Now, more information on this is to really come in a future product announcement video for this kit, because since this model here, I went ahead and made some modifications and tweaks to this set, which will make it a little bit different compared to the unit that we have here. But for the purposes of this commission build, this model here is perfectly suffice. Here it takes us to the drawbar. Here we have the tube guide. Once the oil drum is fitted and I have the tube that emerges out of it, you can see how it works with this assembly over here. In a nutshell, prevents the tube from being dragged on the ground or kinking during the operation. This is held in place via fasteners. This will be the same and kept on the production units as with the main tube design itself. And from there now takes us to the wheels. The wheels that we have here are, not only are they included with the EastCoastArmory.com fuel drum trailer, but are also going to be offered separate on the catalog, as these wheels here are the same patterns which are utilized on the SDKFZ 250 half track. Just like with the other EastCoastArmory.com wheel sets, they comprise of several components. We have the rim pieces, which are made from 3D printed material. There is also a cast rubber tire, which is made from a 3D printed master. Note the tire has all of its thread pattern detailing found. Now, there is also going to be a little rubber valve stem coming from this section over here, but this will be added after the units are fully painted, and you'll definitely see it towards the end of this video. And we also have here the hub detailing on both the inside and the out. Now, for the actual hub detail face, I have this little piece over here, and these are supplied with the wheel sets. The unit does have its correct detailing found, including its little wrench slits found on the end, and they just simply drop in place, concealing the fastener on the inside. Now, on this model here, I went ahead and fabricated 2 brass bushings in order to have the wheels pivot and spin in a more efficient manner. However, this may be something that's subject to change on the actual production units of these trailer kits. So more information on that is to come in a future video. Well, from here, I'm going to now take off the wheels and the tires, and the whole unit will enter into its painting procedure. We'll touch back upon this in a moment. Now let's look at what these pieces of equipment look like now finally mounted to the vehicle, starting with the Tetra fire extinguisher. Now the way this is affixed is with a pin on the center portion here of the rest and casting. I drilled a hole and attached a 1/16 of an inch metal wire. A corresponding hole was drilled into the Armortek grill cover, and the unit just basically fit directly in place. This is the best way, in my opinion, to mount these units, because with the tank being radio controlled and with the large nature of this, it can easily get nudged and bumped, and if it's just held on with adhesive, the piece will just pop off on you frequently. By securing it with a pin, this will prevent this from ever happening. Now, like I said before, the Armortek's Tetras are very nicely made and will definitely enhance any one of your 1/6 scale builds, regardless of what make your Tiger 1 is. Now also, you notice how the Tetra is mounted in this angle that we have here off center, and a part of it does hang over into the grill work, and this is as per the real vehicle. These Tetras are something that are a little bit strange on these Tigers. It's kind of a bit of an afterthought with this tool configuration. From the Tetra takes us to the antenna base. Here you can see what the unit looks like now mounted. Now, for shipping and also for storage, I made it that the antenna can just simply unplug off. This should make storage and shipment of this vehicle a lot easier. No glues or any type of adhesives are needed. The antenna base, or I should say the antenna wire, just plugs directly in place. Now there is a stop system mounted on the inside here, so you can't over insert the antenna into its location. It just drops right in, and then you're good to go. You can see that even though the rubber cast piece has the brass tube in it, it still does have some flexibility, which is very nice and really as per the real vehicle. Moving up takes us past the saves, which were mentioned in the last video, and of course this brings us to the main tow cables. Here you can see how they mount to the model, just like they would on any other Tiger 1. Here goes the wire cutter, again now fully weathered and mounted in place. Moving along takes us to the front. Here we have the front Pioneer tools, which were again mentioned in the last video. And here we have the jack block. Now for anyone with a keen eye, you'll notice that the jack block is mounted slightly different compared to what is contemporarily seen. Normally these two bands here run along parallel with the mounting bar. The reason why they're not on this model was the block itself fit better in this orientation. Now keep in mind, on the real Tiger 1, the block was a symmetrical piece and can be mounted in this way if necessary. So it's not inaccurate to have the block in this configuration. Moving downward takes us to the bow MG34T machine gun. As you can see, it's been fitted to its appropriate location. And here we have the large front shovel, which I believe was mentioned before. From the shovel takes to the spare track. Now the spare track with this type of track rack just slides directly into place. On some other variants of the Tiger 1, namely on more earlier renditions, there were 2 or 3 different variations of mounting the spare track to the front. Some had a flange type system which actually bolts and sandwiches the unit in place, but this one here is a passive system and just relies on the gravity and the weight of the track to just slide them into place, and the track rests on its guide horns that we have here. The unit again just slid directly in place, and once in place isn't going to move. And on the opposite side we have again the other tow cable and the track removal cable, which I mentioned briefly in the earlier scene. From the removal cables now takes us to the home-mounted S-mine launchers. Now, like I said in an earlier video, these units are a staple found on early production German Tiger 1s. And the versions on this model here again are the rested ones from East Coast Armory. Now, since the last time I mentioned these, I went ahead and added the firing cables, which connect to this little bar that we have here. And here we have the unit more up close. Here you can see how the wire emerges from the grill work. It then enters into this section here where the insulation is stripped, and the braids are then wrapped around which would be a threaded rod, and then the retention knob is just pressure tightened in place. Now, one thing that's unique is that on the rear portion here, the wire just enters unceremoniously directly into the tank via the grill work. It's a rather un-German, shall we say, way that this is executed. Now, on the other portions of the vehicle, namely on the front and on the side over there, there is a small hole drilled into the armor plate, and the wire enters into that location there via that point. But on the two in the rear, it just goes directly into the grill, like the way you see it here. From the S-mine brings us to the Feifel canisters, and you'll notice the chain work has now been added. On the real Feifel, you can take these 3 caps off in order to get access to the baffle system, and on these 2 bottom cones here is what's used to drain out any solid particulate that the cyclone system would have accumulated in these 2 ducts. And to prevent these units from getting lost, retention chain is found on these sections. The chain is just my usual size and scale format and was just mounted in place. From the chain takes us to the jack. Now this is the same Armortek jack that was mentioned and showcased before, and now has been mounted in place. Now you'll notice that the jack is mounted upside down. This is due to the clearances needed in order to fit the jack in place. Now on the real unit this can be done, however normally the jack would be in the upright position. The reason why it's not on this model is because of the way the Armortek's handle is rendered. In order for me to have it in quote-unquote the correct way, it's going to bump into some certain bits of detailing, so for this build here it was easier just to mount the unit upside down. And from the jack takes us to the metal hooks, which again I mentioned before. Now on this model here, I was able to get the two mounted in the two rear sections. However, the two on the front were not able to be mounted. This was because of the spare track rack, which is mounted on the front. If we look here, you can see that with the fitting of the spare track rack, this gets in the way of where the U-hooks would go. So rather than trying to mount them to this model, I just simply... And of course, this now brings us to the 500-pound elephant in the room. No, not that elephant. The fuel trailer, which is mounted behind this vehicle. Now, of course, I went over the trailer in a little bit more detail earlier in this video, but here you can see the unit now fully painted, weathered, and of course, hitched up to the tank. Here we have the rubber tire. Note the hubcap has been fitted, and so has the little rubber valve stem. Now, the way the system patches into the fuel system on the real tank is that you would have this tube, which would patch into this little spigot section here on the side of the German fuel drum. It would run along this tube through this eyelet, make its way towards the top deck, and then insert itself directly into the one fuel cell found on the back here of the Tiger 1. Now, several people watching this are probably scratching their heads wondering if the Tiger 1 can even do this. And from what I've seen, there are no photographs of this type of system hooked up to the Tiger 1. However, this system would be able to function on the Tiger 1 if the need be ever arose. Now note, this is the smaller single fuel drum trailer, and more than likely the vehicle could have used either this one or the double fuel drum trailer if necessary. Generally, by the way, this fuel drum is, or I should say this version with the single drum, is more of an early war feature, generally found on 38T tanks as well as I believe some Panzer IIIs, but with this vehicle being an early production Tiger 1, it definitely falls into that little time frame where these units would have still been utilized. And on top of that, it's just a really unique accessory to have lugged behind your vehicle. Now, you may be saying to yourself, well, John, that's all well and good, but I just want to drive the tank without this trailer hooked up. Does it permanently modify the model? And the answer is, of course not. In order to remove the trailer, you simply unplug the tube, carefully wrap it around the trailer here, like so. Now, in the back here, we have the tow pin. Now, the tow hitch on this model here is the stock Armortek one, which is made from metal, either CNC metal like on this version, or in the past it would have been made from that cast white metal alloy, which is found on the first two generations of Tiger 1s from Armortek. Now, the tow pin itself is a ECA component. It's actually made from cast resin and has been on the ECA catalog for a number of years now. Albeit this is the first time it's actually used for its intended purpose. With the camera on its tripod, I could go ahead and have two hands free to remove the pin, and then huzzah, the entire unit can be pivot away. And here's the trailer now independent from the tank. Note just how freely the trailer moves and is completely independent with its wheel design. So being able to be lugged behind the model is definitely not going to be an issue. Another interesting about these German trailers is that you'll see that how the Germans went with the design of the stanchion. On the American Jeep trailers, specifically if you watch those videos that I have on the ECA channel, the Americans have this very elaborate design where the unit can actually pivot and lock in place or fold up for the storage mode. The Germans actually, strangely enough, went with the more simplistic route, and rather than having that complex mechanism, they just have, well, a piece of metal. Note the geometry of the piece is that when the trailer is positioned downward, it lies completely flat with the ground, and then it's not exactly in the way when the unit is hitched up. Well, that's really all there is to it. With that, that wraps up this end of project video for this 1/6 scale radio controlled Armortek Early Production German Tiger 1. Before I go ahead and sign off on this video, I want to give a special thanks and shout out to all of my subscribers who have been following this build's progress all the way from the project start video, which seems like eons ago, but all good things finally come to an end, don't they? Well, from here, I'm going to go ahead and take the model for a good test run, and that video should again be dropping shortly after this one gets posted, so definitely keep an eye open for that. And if you're new to this channel and you want to keep up to date with the new posted content, be sure to subscribe to this channel. It's a great way to keep in touch and keep up to date on the project update videos like this guy over here, as well as the smaller scale model showcase videos that frequently get showcased on the ECA channel. Another way to keep in the loop of new posted content is by liking us on Facebook. There I have a ton of photographs of this particular build that have been posted since the project start and have been continuously updated to the point that you see it here, as well as all the other smaller and larger scale builds that have been showcased on the ECA channel in the past. Furthermore, don't forget to swing by eastcoastarmory.com, where there's even more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks for watching.